now software companies are being required to drive outcomes, and that change, as opposed to just enabling a workflow or giving people tools, and that change is creating this new issue for SaaS companies or something like that. And I said, it's always been about outcomes, and that like bad SaaS companies weren't about outcomes and good ones always have been. And then I think Rashad was like, come on and talk about it. I think that's what happened.
That's exactly right. Yeah, I just found it.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. Why do you think that?
Why do I think that? I mean, I think that like ultimately outcomes are, no one wakes up in any given day and is like, you know what I need to do today? Like today's the day I want to buy some software, right? Like that's not what drives people. I wish it did. That's not what happens. People like have some sort of problem that they're trying to solve that isn't about like just clicking the buttons in your software. Like for PostScript, for example, like, the thing that drives our economic engine with our customers is that people want to maximize the dollars associated with their SMS spend. So they want to like decrease their total cost of ownership and drive more revenue and more sales through the every SMS dollar they're spending. That's why they seek us out, or that's the problem they're seeking to solve. Our technology enables that, but like if we just deliver the technology and it doesn't result in the outcome that they're trying to solve for, then like they churn or they go seek it out somewhere else. And like I've spent my entire career in software. I've literally never done anything else besides SaaS in my entire life. It's the only jobs I've ever had were SaaS companies. And like I feel like that's always been the case. Like if you are with a winning SaaS company, it's because you're driving an outcome for your buyer that like solves their problem. As precious as we all probably want to be about how cool our tech is, it doesn't really matter. The only reason people renew is because they are like, I came here to make more dollars or gain efficiency or whatever it is that the value prop is that they were seeking out. And like, if you don't deliver that, then you're getting cut. And I've never worked in a SaaS company where that wasn't the case. And I'm talking about SaaS. My first job in SaaS ever was in 2009 when like SaaS was like barely a thing. Like literally we were competing with on-prem solutions. So it was like day one of software. But it's always been that way. It's always been outcomes is how you're measured. And if you want to be really, really successful, you have to deliver those. And so my contention was like, this isn't new. It may be AI is making the way that you have to do some things different, but like ultimately it's always been you deliver outcomes or you end up creating churn for your business, in my opinion.
Mike, I couldn't agree more. I used to be a customer of PostScript back when I was an agency. And I remember when we were looking for the SMS product that we were going to use across the agency with, all of the different brands or over 100 brands that we onboarded. We had a conversation with Attentive, and because you had to have a conversation with Attentive to start using Attentive. And the conversation felt like, well, what are you going to do for us? Right? The sales guy was like, really just trying to maximize the sale. I'm like, I'm here to solve a problem about SMS. And we ended up going with PostScript because it was like log in, get out, and the job's done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, in some ways, like, a lot of us are marketers or marketing adjacent, right? Like there's like, the jobs to be done framework and, don't need to talk about whether that's the right one or the wrong one, but like ultimately it's like kind of pointing at this, which is like, there's something that a customer is trying to hire you to do. And if you're very aligned to that, and you deliver that thing, then like that, we like to make everything really complicated, right? It's pretty simple in some ways. And if you can be very aligned to that job, or you understand your customer well enough that you like feel like you know what that is and you point your whole entire company at that, then I think you create not only strong outcomes for customers, but strong outcomes for your business. And in my opinion, that underpins all of the successful SaaS stories that there are, whether you're like bootstrapped or venture backed or whatever. I don't really think it matters. I've been in a bunch of different environments. I've always said, like, I think the person who's closest to the customer is going to win. And when I say closest to the customer, I mean, I understand the customer problem as deep as the customer, so I can act accordingly. And acting accordingly to me has always been, I'm going to solve that core problem in a way that's like defensible and that the customer agrees with. And if you do that, then you get multi-year renewals, which we all know we want and love. If you don't, they'll go find something else.
The difference though is like, I think the expectation of what software should do has changed a lot. So it used to be that software just had to enable you to do something. Now software is being asked to do the thing for you. And I think that's a gradual shift. But
yeah, Mike, I think the way I would push back on even PostScript is you have an agency running PostScript for a large number of brands. And the brand gets their outcome by hiring an agency to operate PostScript for them. And the reason they do that is because of things like thinking about the campaign, thinking about the content, thinking like someone has to do the work to get the outcome.
Yeah, but like that's only, I would actually push back on that a little bit. We just to contextualize what Rashiv's saying, we have a branch of PostScript called PostScript Plus, and it is essentially what he's talking about. It's more or less an agency. It's like a hand over the keys, we do it for you sort of service. Some of our customers use it, some don't. The amount of customers that use that is like sub 15%. But some customers need that to get the outcome that they're seeking. Some do not, because they have really great in-house retention teams who know what to do and are going to like partner with us to deploy a strategy that's going to like help them achieve their goal. Now, our sales team, if in the sales motion they get a sense that the thing that the client is seeking out is unlikely to be achieved with just our technology and their in-house team, they recommend this other service, and we find a way to make the economics work. But ultimately, we only prescribe that if we think it's critical to the outcome that the person's trying to get. And so, and like, that's just a professional service, which has existed like in every software business model there's ever been, SaaS on-prem software before. There's always been professional services to help people get what they want out of it.
No, dude. This is where I think there's a nuance that matters, which is that I think we are moving closer to a world where customers will expect their software vendors to solve the whole problem. Just like in the previous world, between the professional service and the software, or the team and the software, or the agency and the software, that's how you solve the whole problem. I think you will end up in a, now we can call them whatever we want, right? We can call it forward deployed engineers. We can call it professional services. We can, at some point, automate a large majority of it with agent workflows. Like, it doesn't, like, the verbiage I think is less relevant to what is the customer thinking the job of the software vendor is. And I think that the total degree to which the customer is expecting the software vendor to solve the whole problem is shifting. Like that I think is likely, right?
I don't contest that, actually. I mean, but I think that what you're describing is just people are asking for an expansion of the services that we offer. Like the problem is expanding, that they're asking us to go attack. I agree with that. And I mean, you can see some really good examples of that in the market where people are adding on adjacent services. Like, the financial services companies are good examples, like the Ramps of the world, the Ripplings of the world, that are becoming like, they're doing everything for everyone, but that's just an expansion of their model and what their customers are asking them to do. And people ask us to do more. People are probably asking Fermat to do more. I'm not contesting that that's the case. I'm just saying that, like, the idea that SaaS 1.0 companies got away not delivering outcomes for customers is just, like, in my opinion, not true.
I think what Rashab is saying is that the expectation isn't actually that tied to the idea of that they want an outcome. It's that they want an outcome without having to engage a service as well, or a service arm. It's like, and whether that exists in the product right now or not, I think it is like one of these like gradations of expectations that is moving into a space where you're getting exposed to like tools, even if it's a different category, that seemingly end to end do the thing that you were trying to achieve with like one or multiple people powered by software before. And I think that the expectation of value, especially for things that potentially cost a little bit more, like if you can draw a straight line between how much your thing is costing and then salaries, I think what is happening is that people are expecting the software to replace people. And again, I think it is like a gradation depending on what their experience was with this like category of software or service before. But I just think it's that the expectation isn't particularly on just like the outcome. It's that they want the outcome by paying for the software and not engaging with the service, or at least less of a service.
Right. I think there's an interesting overlap between what Taylor was saying last week, though. People do value people right now more than they value software. Paying $2,000 for software seems expensive. Paying $2,000 for a person is a bargain, right? So, that service component of PostScript seems smart. That is something that people value really highly, and it can be competitive with labor. Maybe it's a way to, earn pretty large deal sizes and solve the problem more comprehensively than what is possible with software right now.
Yeah, I guess like what we're talking about too is like what's real now versus what's the future. Like, are people asking for this right now? Like, I think that the easy example is, I think probably what's happening, and I don't know this firsthand. I don't work in for a company in customer service, but it seems like the Fins of the world, the real value prop that they're being asked to solve is like, I want to extract costs out of my support org, and I will give dollars to whoever can do that. Whether or not that is going, obviously they've been growing that business really effectively. Whether or not that is good for the customer or not, I think is probably dependent on the deployment and any business, but we'll set that aside. I would say like in a lot of places, and I'll just speak for what I see every day, like people really aren't asking us that yet. Like people are asking, people aren't coming to PostScript being like, I'd like to extract human capital dollars out of my business to run my owned marketing channels. And to do that, I would need to hand you the keys. In fact, actually, we get, when that conversation even comes up, it's mostly the opposite, where people are pushing really, really hard back on that, especially if it's meant to be done by AI. Now, I think like obviously we're early in the life cycle, and eventually we think that maybe the capabilities will get to a point where brands might be like more interested in that. But right now, I think it's like a glimmer in people's eye, and they're not asking for that today.
Okay. I'm going to get in trouble for saying this, but I'm going to say this is because of how organizations are built and has nothing to do with people's actual preferences. The reason why the support team is the first one that is being articulated in this way is, how many brands do you know where the support team is sitting next to them on desks? Like my desk is here, and then the 20 support people desks are next to me. 0. Okay. They're all outsourced. They're out of sight, out of mind. There's no ability to organizationally push back. And that is why that is like the single best place to make the change first. It is an organizational behavior problem. It's not a end desire problem.
It's
End desire.
It's also the easiest spot to get results and see those results immediately because of this. It's much simpler than a lot of these other spaces. And like when you have documentation that AI can reference to understand things, you've got all of this context you can feed it in a way that you can't typically with other tools. And I think that's a very important part of it as well.
Yeah, Jeremiah, I agree with that. Like there's a lot of other consequences of an organizational setup where you hire third parties that need to respond off of a script, right? The script has to exist, for example, right? And so the, I'm not saying that there aren't other benefits of this organizational setup, but the organizational setup is effectively the underlying way that this thing, right? Like like these things feed off of each other. And so then you don't have the organizational pushback when someone shows up and says like, "Hey, don't you want to cut your support team by 70%?" Like that, I mean, to say like, "Hey, it's not going to happen in other departments," is is only an artifact of organizational setup. It is not an artifact of the end desire. Like there's not a business owner out there who does not want to be able to get to build their business to be bigger with less people. It's less communication overhead, it's less cost. Like that is like for sure what people want, right?
If you think it's separate from the efficiency angle and like unlocking scale, you can imagine a world where, you know, more automation in particularly SMS marketing would actually be more effective, right? Right now, if you rely on people, maybe they have certain biases, they have a small sample size of experience that they're using to educate their decision making. But you have access to all of the data, and you could get data in theory from their Shopify store. See, I don't know, was most likely to drive a second purchase, recommend the right products based on their first order, recommend the right products that maximize lifetime value. All of these things that on a send per send basis, especially if you include all the segmentation that would need to happen, would just be massively out of scope for a human, right? So
Totally.
Separate from efficiency and
But
measurable.
Jack, you're preaching what you're taking the words right out of our mouth. I agree with you 100%. I actually think like our roadmap is very tied to this idea that we believe we can create an environment where we are significantly more likely, and we can prove it to you via a holdout test, that we can find the right next best message to maximize your SMS dollars. Ultimately, that's the value prop people seek us out for. What I'm saying is that like it's maybe in support because people view that as a cost center, right? There's not expectation, or at least lesser so, on performance there. And like Rishab said, they're not sitting there, so they are in a position where they probably can't defend themselves the same way. I think that what's in our way, or in any performance channel that's measured that way, is way to being into a full automation situation is, yes, organizational pressures are a component of it, right? There's people there that you're working alongside. The structure impedes the decision to hand the keys over to full automation for sure. But also the performance is, I think, the priority. Like when you can demonstrate at scale that you can outperform in against whatever the status quo is, will facilitate that change. And like, I don't think a lot of people believe that today, not talking about PostScript technologies in general, that that's possible. And getting back to where we started, I would say it's because it doesn't achieve the outcome that they want, which is like to maximize the SMS dollars. Right now, people I think would think, well, the guy who I've been working with for 2.5 years, who's rebuilt my own marketing channels from scratch, I still believe that person can do a better job running this machine than you guys could. We one day believe we'll probably, like Jack was saying, be able to do it better. But until they believe that, they're putting their dollars and effort to where they think they're going to get the best outcome. And we have to act accordingly. And like, yeah, we're going to have to be threading a needle in the adoption curve for sure. But I still think it all like comes back to like, what are they trying to achieve with the software? How do they believe they're best going to achieve that? Are we showing up for them in a way that helps them do that in the best way? And whether that's a fully automation AI world, whether that's with professional services, or whether it would be like fully PLG self-serve, it depends on what outcome they're seeking. And like that, the being able to react appropriately to that outcome is like, I think if you're a SaaS person, like that's your job. The puck's moving. You have to be able to move where the puck is going, but like the job's the job, which is like, what does your customer want to achieve? Can you deliver that in a way that is commensurate with the value you're asking them to pay for your software, and creates a business that like can exist for yourself? And sometimes the puck moves in a way where those things become incompatible. Sometimes the puck moves in a way where it actually strengthens your ability to have a strong SaaS business on top of that. But ultimately, like, we're all trying to like meet the outcome needs of the customers. And sometimes that requires people, sometimes it doesn't. I think in the future, we think it'll require less people, but the only way to know that is to deliver the outcome to prove it. Right. And so like, it's always about the proof.
The
And,
other the other thing though is what you're talking about. It has the potential to massively expand the use cases and the way in which your product is used and the complexity of how it could be used, right? So there's a world in which that doesn't mean less people. It means people being more effective with the tools that they're using. And I think that's something I think about a lot with the way that we're thinking about AI in our products. Is I think the easy pitch is we'll replace people for you because it's a line item you can look at and say, okay, yeah, this makes sense to pay $2,000 a month for this thing versus $20,000 a month for those people. But the more powerful thing in the long term is actually how do you expand the ability for this to drive better outcomes for your business? And that, I think, looks like enabling people to do more impactful things.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we think, it's there's probably a similar proxy to like the way that like Meta has worked over time, where it's like, media buying to creative strategy, right? Like, I don't want our customers trying to like think of the best, most complicated segmentation strategy. Like, we're either there now or very close to being able to do that algorithmically way smarter than they could. Not because they're not smart, but because it's like a human can only have visibility to a certain amount of variables in a really complex system. Obviously, a computer can do that better. Now, the like actual hook, the thing that goes into the text that drives the engagement, or that would show up in an ad, for example, that stuff, I think, is probably pretty far away still of us being able to do that better than a traditional like retention marketer. And so like the jobs are going to change for sure.
I'm not sure. I think that there's probably some overlap here with, the paid media stuff that you're talking about. I think the reason why we've seen up until more recently and maybe still now, so much terrible ads, so much performance creative that doesn't live up to the expectations of the brand. And the brand looks at it and goes, well, if it works, it works, is because the medium is just so good, right? Facebook is so good at showing your content to the right person. It doesn't matter if you have some shitty ad, it still might print, right? And I think that maybe, I see this in Klaviyo and PostScript and retention platforms as well. You have your performance dashboard and it's doing hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars, even if you just turned on the template welcome flow, right? Why? Because you're sending messages to people who are very likely to purchase, right? So I wonder if the medium is just so effective that at a baseline, especially for those people who are looking for efficiency as opposed to, I want the best outcomes possible. They're looking for, I want this thing to operate and not to pull my hair out and have to talk to one more retention person every week about, what changes they're making. Just actually being able to do all of that.
If that were the criteria, PostScript would be significantly bigger than it is, because you're totally right. Like, there's like, I'm curious what you guys see in your customer bases, but like, I think that's why this is tough, because it's not solely does this perform better, right? Like, I can send the like most clickbaity text on the entire planet that's like, the thing that you looked at 10 seconds ago is about to be out of stock for the rest of your life in about 8 seconds. And I'll give you an 80% discount if you click this button right now. And like, I could like be like, this performs. But as you guys know, I think, like, because our customer bases are a lot of overlap, 99% of brands are like, just because that outperforms what I was going to do, I'm not willing to do that. And so the calibration of like the mix of brand, which is like everyone believes that, brand might be like the last real moat, and we can debate whether you think that that's real or fake, and that's just an illusion to people. But like, people are in this because they're trying to make a brand. They're trying to balance performance, which is actually super critical. and how those things come together and show up in a medium that is part creative, part performance is like why this is difficult. And the amount of times I will show people something that I'm like, I guarantee if you do this, it'll generate you more ROI. And then they say, well, how do I ensure it's on brand? And then we get into that conversation about like, well, what does that mean to you? And where are the guardrails of that? And how does your team, and all that stuff. You know, that's art and science. And that part, at least today, is still art, so, and especially in the way that you interface with clients on it.
I'll give you the most generous view, and then I'll give you the most provocative view that I have of this debate. The most generous view is I think what you said, because you're a generous man. And so, like, I think that it is possible. Like, the one end of the spectrum is that, hey, there's a set of things that the human intuition is very good at that we have not yet been able to coach a machine on. Okay. And people use different words for this. Some people call it taste, some people call it brand, and then there are just people who are exceptional at that. Okay. And for sure, I agree that there are people who are exceptional at that. Do I agree that every marketer who operates every one of these platforms is exceptional at that? I think everything lies on a bell curve, right? That's the most likely outcome. The most likely outcome is that everything lies on a bell curve. Okay. So let's just say that's one end of the spectrum. The other end of the spectrum, which I think is a more provocative one, is what if the machine could do it and could do it better? And the problem is the human psyche, which is like, we hate the loss of control. Like, the like we want control and we want impact, which are highly related to each other. And so,
Yep.
even if I think that even if I have all the evidence in the world that this thing is going to do better, if I'm not the one who thought of that, like the whole, God, what's the Leonardo DiCaprio movie where you like embed an idea? Um,
What,
Inception?
Inception, exactly. Unless I can get all the way to Inception, I'm like not going to convince you to like pick the thing, right? And like those are the two ends of the spectrum.
Well, it depends on what time horizon. Like, I think like eventually it'll get there, right? Like eventually it will, like, I think, well, maybe we should ask this. Like, do you believe that eventually, and when I say like, 20 years out, it'll give it the longest view possible. Do you think that the machine will be able to be coached to do that thing correctly?
Yeah, well, I guess what I'm saying is I think there are places where it is already better. And because it's not reliably better, we still have to fall back on the human because of this lack of reliability. And so I'd actually think that the time frame within which this will happen is extremely fast. Like I think like roughly, I'm like a simple man. Like when Zuck or Sam Altman say something, I just sort of like listen to what they're saying, and I'm like, okay, that's probably true. And so Zuck said that by the end of next year, he's going to be able to like automate Meta. And so I'm like, that's probably true. Like he has said a bunch of stuff that has roughly been correct.
Do you remember that metaverse thing? And there was like jungle noises, and everyone was going to be wearing goggles and living in the metaverse?
I do remember that. I mean, like, I'm not trying to say I think it's one way or the other, like whatever. But I think what you're talking about is like you're changing behavior, right? And how long does it take to do that? Like, regardless of what the performance is, like there's some timeline that we are going to have to get through, even if the technology is there. That's going to take time, but that's just like, how I don't know. I mean, anytime you're like doing something new, whether it's driven by a technological leap or whether it's just simply a novel approach to an existing category of software, for example, there's some adoption curve. And I think, maybe short term, it'll take longer than we all want, but I think it seems like we all kind of have a sense of where we're going. And the question is just like, how fast will it happen? Nobody knows. I wouldn't bet against Zuck either, Rashab. So I get what you're saying, but like, yeah, I think in the near term, is a question mark. In the long term, it seems like an inevitability.
I think direction and taste will be like the only thing that's left. Because like if let's just say Meta ads are fully automated from end to end, and I'm selling like this microphone and there's like 5 other companies selling the same microphone with the same specs. Like the only thing left then is like direction from my company and brand. And if at the end of the day, it's just like a new status quo that gets created. And like most companies can't survive just like at the status quo, or at least their ambitions don't align with just like we can sell a certain amount of microphones to a certain subset of people. Like the mandate is going to be we need to sell more microphones than we did before, and that means selling more microphones than like our competitors. And so therefore we now need to have a stance or a taste or an angle in which was not created by the machine. It just reiterates the thing that was always true, which is like brand matters a lot. And over any time horizon, any sort of technological or product feature gets copied and multiplied by a bunch of other people, and that's just going to happen faster and faster and faster and faster until the end of time. Okay, like what direction is this company actually going to go in?
Dude, totally. All I'm suggesting is that the total number of people who can do that is not large. Why is it that certain brands are so like are create the culture or create the zeitgeist, like, and those are the ones that endure, right? So it's like Apple is think different, Nike, everyone's an athlete, essentially, right? And they actually set culture, and but the total number of people who can do that is not large. And so for the rest of us, like including me, and it's like I'm just gonna hand it to the machine.
Them, it's way harder to say every single person has a different point of view, and they want us as software providers to be able to deliver something that will consistently reflect their point of view, regardless if it's the best or the highest performing, or if it's like the cultural tastemakers. That's really tough because that's all up here. And I also agree with what Zach was saying, like the people who are saying that's what they want us to do, they believe in their head that there's like some defensible thing about that, right? Like they agree, this is the last defensible thing, this is my moat, so I need you to hit that. That means that, if your ICP is the top 100,000 stores in Shopify, you're being asked to develop a creative model that can reflect back to the merchant in 100,000 distinct ways, reliably, instantly, their brand, not the number one brand. That's way, way, way harder to do consistently, I think, which is why people are like, I'm not handing the keys totally over just yet.
Well, also, like Nike, as an example, didn't define culture by defining the masses at the start, and no culturally defining brand actually ever did that. Like, and then Apple's like another really good example. It's just like it was a bunch of fucking weirdos in a garage, and they would meet up and hack away at stuff. Like they and it's like another example would be like a technology company would be like a company I really like Teenage Engineering, that make like really random like audio hardware and like things like that. It's like if they took the playbook from Apple, they wouldn't be successful in the mission of potentially defining culture in like 30 years. And so I actually think that if you did like lean too much into like AI stuff, you could end up losing your shot if your ambitions were to become like a culturally defining brand. Because like part of it is like being super like stringent about niche, and you can't really have a large enough opinion when you're not big enough. So you kind of have to pick like a smaller thing to have an opinion about.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think if we think about culture representing demand, then it can be responsive or reactionary to what the market's asking for. As a SaaS company, that might be understanding the way that people are engaging with software that's extremely popular right now and what they're asking from it. Know everything about me, make the best recommendations, or take the best actions possible on my behalf. But I couldn't agree more with you, Zach, that I think culture is supply side. It might be brands, big and small, with vision defining what it is that how things should be better, right? So I could be a small brand, right? Saying that for my customers, for people like me, this is the solution that I think should exist, right?
It's actually interesting when I really think about this. This actually exists currently in the way that brands are distributed. There's lots of little micro communities that brands serve. And in those contexts, you don't see competition really, because the reality is the market's not big enough to have much competition, and it takes a lot to execute against that. And so, I don't know, like, I can't even think of a good example off the top of my head. Oh, here's one I saw the other day. A company that makes, what is it? Like fermented kelp products. Like, it's just like such a niche thing that, like maybe that could become a big category someday, but there's basically one brand in that category, right? And and I don't even think they're doing that well. But point is, like, there's a bunch of little categories like that all over the place. And then you've got like t-shirts, and you can see a brand like True Classic come in and in 3 years become, I mean, they're still not even that big in that category, but like that's a massive success to be able to go from zero to hundreds of millions in revenue in a few years. And you've got a Grunes supplements, massive category, daily vitamin, basically. Massive category. You can make a bunch of noise very quickly. So I almost wonder if it looks like people with a unique perspective have the ability to move faster against incumbents. And incumbents have the ability to protect themselves potentially against those moves a little bit faster. But ultimately, it kind of looks like it does today, where you've got less competition in small categories, more competition in bigger categories, and everybody's trying to go after whatever that pie is that makes sense in that moment.
Yeah, but I could tell you that if you're trying to provide, what I'm talking about, like from an SMS lens, we all do different stuff. So like whatever, the creative output, right, is a component of it, right? You have a software, there's the performance side, there's the workflows and all that sort of stuff. And then there's the brand side that you put the creative into the thing and get the distribution. I can tell you with certainty, though, this was why this is really challenging, that like if you created like a creative prompt that would share the between True Classic and Cuts and Built and Viore and the Fresh Clean Teas, the t-shirt industrial complex, if you were like, I've nailed that, right? They would all be equally unhappy with the output. It has to be theirs, has to be reflective of them, even if it performed really well. And so like, I think that, and then you can go like a level factor down. Like I was just thinking about like, I was talking to the founder of Born Primitive recently, and like technically they sell like leisure wear, shoes, shirts, like their clothing brand, right? But like, that's even a factor level down. Like it's very specific. It's like veteran owned, fitness oriented. They're targeting a very specific type of person, but like technically they sell, you could say like they're part of the t-shirts that get sold in Shopify too. It's not like for like, right? And historically, I think in SaaS, like you would say, I'll print this once and sell it to a bunch of people. And as folks who are building an e-com where creative is and brand is a very, very big component of it, you can't really just do that. Like the bar is way, way, way higher. And I think it's, getting back to the outcomes part of it, like that's still part of the calculus that the brand's using on whether or not they're going to buy and renew our software or hand the keys over to our AI or not, is if you're hitting that. And it's a really tough thing to hit, because the True Classic and Built and Cuts and Viore and Fresh Clean Teas are not trying to like hire the generically best t-shirt salesman over text messaging that they can get. They're trying to hire the best person at selling t-shirts over text messaging for their brand specifically, and only that. And that's, I think, a criteria of that's, I think, it's everywhere, but very concentrated in e-com, just given the nature of what we do. These are all entrepreneurs who have a really strong point of view about why their brand should even exist in the world in the first place, and they're honoring that constantly. It's different for every single person, which makes it tough, which is why I'm saying that, like, today, do I think eventually people will be asking for this? I think they will. I think today, unlike what happens with support agents, which are like, cut these costs out of my business, people are like, I don't believe you that you can nail that for me specifically better than the team that I've hired and cultivated over the last many years. And they're probably wrong on the segmentation side, and they're probably currently right on all of the taste, brand, et cetera, the stuff that they consider to be their moat.
I have a few questions that I want to to push on this idea a bunch, um, and take them in whatever order. One question is, what is the economics of that? Asked differently, like, what is the actual value as expressed by willingness to pay of getting that outcome? Second related question is, articulate for me why someone does or does not sell on Amazon, where you are a t-shirt seller and a t-shirt seller is a t-shirt seller. That's like the most extreme example of the sort of take away all uniqueness and like, hey, you're t-shirts. And then articulate for me, how does that brand think about being inside of physical retail? So, like, let's just pretend, for argument's sake, that in what you are describing in the digital world in your owned channels is possible. Then I want to understand the economics of that. Let's
Mm-hmm.
then go to the next level, which is Amazon, which is a little bit like closer to you are just another person in this category. And Amazon tries very hard to make you look like another person in this category. I know that's not exactly true, but let's just say that. And then let's go all the way to retail, which is like, you're in this aisle, right? And I know, don't get me wrong, I understand that's why packaging is such a big topic, because everybody's thinking about, when you look at the shelf, how do you stand out? But the retailer is not thinking about that. So just let's deconvolute those things as a way to interact with this question a little bit more tangibly.
On the economics side, the first part of it, are you saying the economics to us or to the brand or both?
Sorry, what are the full economics of it? Like, I don't care who gets what economics. Like, I want to understand like how much value is getting created. Like, economics to us is just what value capture is happening, which is like not a particularly relevant thing. It's like, help me understand the value generation that's happening for the economy, and then of course how that gets split is like a business model question. So like not actually that interesting, right?
Well, I don't know. I actually think that there's something that could happen as a result of nailing this that's incredibly unique to SaaS companies of the future. That's, which I'll talk about in a second. But like, so you're saying, what's the economics of being able to like nail the performance side and the brand side for a company to be able to sell the most shirts in their own way?
Yeah, presumably total value has to go up, right? Otherwise you wouldn't do it. Like, the economic system doesn't work if that's like in the idealized outcome. Total value has to increase, right? Otherwise, like, the system doesn't work. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one way to look at it would be like, all of us in some way work on this, right? Which is, you know, the standard conversion rate drop off is like the thing that we're all trying to help people solve in different ways, right? Like, you buy a certain amount of traffic, people go to the site, a bunch of them don't convert, some of them do. If we can get more of them to convert, the pie gets bigger. We all influence that in some way. Theoretically, and I'll just use, the SMS example because that's what I'm familiar with, is theoretically, if we could create like the best t-shirt salesman for True Classic over SMS, is we would increase the conversion rate of people who buy after being subscribed to the channel. So there's some implied number that is. Theoretically, we get so good at that we could drive that number up to its like natural, like perfect equilibrium, which would be somewhere higher than it currently is. And True Classic would be making more money, which would, not only be making more money, but would be like decreasing the cost of ownership of the channel, because theoretically we wouldn't have to scale costs at the exact same amount. So that's how they would make more money if we like nailed that. The thing that I think is incredibly interesting for SaaS, right? Because the thing that we're probably all dealing with inside of our own businesses, and every SaaS company deals with this, is like churn is the big thing, right? If you have a too leaky of a bucket, you can't have a successful SaaS business. The business model that came before us, which was on-prem, had, against the customer's will, a very sticky element to it. The servers were under the desk, right? They were leasing those, like you had to show up there to deliver the thing. That's pretty sticky. I think in this new world with these new tools and AI and whatnot, we might be headed into an environment where we're getting the stickiness back, right? Because if True Classic believes that PostScript has cultivated the best possible salesman over SMS for them, then like theoretically that's better lock-in than anything that we've had in SaaS before. It's getting as close to the old way, which was very sticky. So I actually think like there's a reason. Obviously there's always a reason to do it to help customers make even more money, but that level of specialization I think creates new less portable features of your software and your service delivery to your customers that might make them stickier than they would naturally be just doing a good job today. Because if you build taste in these things that are, we're talking about how, amorphous these things are in the first place. If you nail that on behalf of a customer inside of your software, like theoretically that'll make you significantly more valuable. It'd be harder for other people to copy. And so I think there's economics on both sides that are really interesting and make the whole thing worth pursuing. But ultimately, no one does any of this if I can't make True Classic's conversion rate go up and more revenues coming in because we're increasing conversions in a way that doesn't scale at the same rate as their costs. If I can't do that, then I don't have anything. I have to be able to do that. That's really the thing that they're buying from us, and we'll be rewarded appropriately.
I feel like there's potentially a bit of a misalignment though when we think about like the macro versus the individual brand. And that like, I think for the consumer, the ideal outcome of AI and like the personalization ability is that it creates less waste. Like in my family, there are things like let's say I buy a True Classic t-shirt. It's like, I don't like it, right? Like I buy this t-shirt, I'm not going to return it. It goes in my closet. I wear it a couple of times. I try another brand. Like you kind of, and even within brands, obviously this can happen too, right? But the ideal outcome isn't necessarily like macro wise, isn't necessarily that True Classic sells more unless it's actually a superior product to the other products that are out there, right? Which I think is probably the case. That's why they're growing so fast, right? It's clearly superior to a lot of brands. But I think the challenge here is that it's not like I think the actual best outcome maybe is less stuff being purchased from some places, more from others, and you're actually like at the like macro and the level and the individual consumer level, it's actually just like a more efficient process. I just think that's in conflict with individual brands sometimes. So not to say that would be with True Classic, but there's some brand out there that's losing in this context or has to lose in order for that to be the best.
You're saying because the consumer leverages AI to like make a more correct choice, and that means that the value tends to accrue to the best product in the space.
It should, yeah. I mean, and at the end of the day, like no matter if we can drive more sales for brands, that you can't necessarily drive more spending power in the economy at that level, right? Like there's a cap to that. There always will be. Like it goes up over time, but at a certain level, there's not an ability to exceed whatever the aggregate spending power is. So I guess I don't know how that plays out. Like the incentive will be for AI to be inaccurate sometimes in terms of what's beneficial for a consumer from the brand standpoint, at least, because you want to make more sales. It's not necessarily going to be.
That would only be true if there was literally no differentiation. Like it was a complete commodity, right? Like,
well, yeah, I guess what I'm saying is two brands competing against each other. Let's say they're 50-50 market share, right? They both want more sales. They're both brands are incentivized to sell more, but for the consumer, that's not actually what's beneficial. And so I don't know how that plays out. To me, I don't know the answer to this. I'm just like, it's an interesting thing to think about. Like, in an optimized world where AI is driving a lot, what does that actually look like? Does it look like more purchasing? Does it look like less? Does it look like massive winners and losers?
And it leads to price compression. Because, Mike, have you ever tried to ask ChatGPT how it makes product recommendations? Anybody listening to this at the 59th minute should do this. They should go to ChatGPT and say, can you tell me how you would, like, what criteria you're using when you make a recommendation for a product? Number one, price. And then you ask it, why did you pick price? And then it says, that's a good point. I don't know if you care about price. And it's like this very funny interaction, actually. But yeah, you're going to have all of this conflict all over the place. So
You'd assume over time, though, that with personalization to you, whether it's predictive or it's because of your past conversations, that you start to get recommendations that are like sort from high to low, right? And ideally, you start to get those recommendations without even having to have a conversation, right? You don't have to say, hey, actually, I want the best, not a compromise, right? It just knows that about you because it's integrated enough into the rest of your tools. Yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting.
Yeah, I mean, their context, right? Personal context. Like, all of us have T-shirts, right? And I'm sure if we all went in each other's closets, we all have different brands, right? There's like context of why we all made those decisions. It's personal to every single person. Yeah, so I think that the context is important, because most it's not surprising to me that ChatGPT would say, like, okay, choose some criteria to sort these, price being number one, because that's like a piece of structured data and it's sortable on every site. So like that must be important. So here's price. But theoretically, there would be a world where it would know you or be able to take data from other systems to contextualize the selection, right? Like because it's very clear in our economy that that's not the thing that everyone cares about most. You know, the Issey Miyake Apple thing is sold out, right? Like, so like price is not the driver of 100% of the dollars in the economy. Yeah.
Especially for retention. It's not at all. Like the reason why I would buy a t-shirt again is if I got complimented on it. Or potentially my experience when washing it was better or something. But like, and that's where, like, that's what I'm saying. Like brand matters. Like if someone puts an ad in front of me, that's like, and the hook is, I've never been complimented so much in a t-shirt or something. Like I don't give a fuck what ChatGPT has to say about the blend of cotton and polyester. And I don't think anybody makes purchasing decisions like that. And like, I know for myself, like I have like brands that I just like for no reason. Like one of the craziest ones is like James Purse. It's like the stupidest price for a t-shirt, but I buy them because like it somehow makes me feel something that like nobody else knows, and like ChatGPT would never know that. And so like I actually, I'm not a huge, I think for buying software, like ChatGPT is like really good, but I don't think for like buying something like a t-shirt, like ChatGPT is going to make that much of an impact, is specifically on the retention piece of buying the second, third, and fourth t-shirt. If anything, it's going to introduce reasons why I should try something new.
We find a lot of times that it makes suggestions on what you should buy from the portfolio of products, which is really valuable to the brands that are, hero SKU, but have a huge long tail of things. To like deepen the relationship and the connection by providing subscriber context in the mix too. Or they might be like, imagine it knows, Zach, you moved from a, warm weather place to a cold weather place, or vice versa. It might make different types of suggestions that help drive you deeper into the, the brand ecosystem. One day, hopefully automatically. Today, you would have to like have a good retention marketer who like thinks of angles and like tries to build the segments to go target the people who might be doing those types of things. And so, I think eventually that's where it's going. How fast we'll get there is a question mark.
Well, this has been good. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. This was an interesting conversation. I got to tell you, I want to see it. I want to see that, check a box and do nothing in PostScript. But we might have to wait a little while.
We're working on it. There's the development of the technology component, and then there is the adoption of the technology component. Both equally important. They are related, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, dude, just like with Shopify itself, the adoption is obviously going to come first from the people who are launching new brands. Because then there is no change management, right? So that I think is actually I mean, we didn't get to talk about it, but that's actually the most interesting thing is I think it's completely understated that actually all of this change in software, the single biggest thing it's going to do is create the next wave of new brands. Every technology cycle has basically done that. And yeah, that I think is actually going to be the most interesting. And it's going to be the people who are native to that way of working that end up being tomorrow's Fury and True Classic and whatever else, right? Just like these guys were native to Shopify and Facebook ads. So
Yeah, I think the one thing that we didn't touch on as well is that to some extent, the new brands that are going to fail because they pursue efficiency, they use AI before it's there yet, and they get lazy as opposed to making the best product. They're going to exist, right? Where they could have won if they went with taste, right? And that might be the same context for PostScript, right? Those brands that are, I don't know, using ChatGPT and just copy paste straight over and fumbling the bag, right? They're going to exist, right? In the service of just automating everything, right?
And I've been actually surprised a little bit at how many people push back against that immediately. Like I thought more people would just be like, "Oh, cool, feed the machine and we'll just see what comes out of it." But in my experience, at least in this, year 1.5 with like commercially available AI products available to folks, the quality, taste, brand, guardrails, whatever you want to call those, they're there already. And people are actually not, they're excited about the potential, but their tolerance for what they're willing to accept, like what's like the AI slop tolerance in retention marketing is actually incredibly low. And it's much lower than I thought it was going to be on, try number one. I thought, maybe people would say, 80/20 is totally good. What we're finding is like, no, it's like 99/1. And, that it's our job as a software vendor to like figure out how to hurdle that now.
Yeah, getting to 90 is easy. Getting from 90 to 99 is really, really hard.
Awesome.
Cool.
Mike, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah,
Great to meet you.
anytime. Bye, guys.
Catch you in a bit.